Whoa!
Semiotics of the Kitchen is 7 minutes long and, according to Carol Armstrong and Catherine DeZiger, can be described simply as a short black and white video that reveals a suburban kitchen to be a war zone, where routine food preparation masks the violent frustrations felt by women at being confined by the home. On a counter before her are a variety of utensils, each of which she picks up, names, and proceeds to demonstrate, but with gestures that depart from the normal uses of the tool. In an ironic grammatology of sound and gesture, the woman and her implements enter and transgress the familiar system of everyday kitchen meanings. The violence in Rosler's movements is what Pamela Lee describes as real-time spectacle through video transmission. In a way, Rosler is treating her body as an extension that Lee sees as a comment on the status of media taken on by women artists of the time. Tanya Leighton writes, "Poaching freely from the mass media and entertainment industry, both in form and content, appropriating and reusing spectacular forms, is one of the hallmarks of contemporary projected images, which she terms the replay-remake technique. In Rosler's video, this can be seen in her appropriation of the stylized form of contemporary cooking shows, and disrupts it by modifying the expected uses of the commodity objects therein. In a way, this relates to the theory of the spectacle by Debord, which he forms into theory in his Society of the Spectacle. According to Debord, the spectacle proclaims the predominance of appearances, and asserts that all human life, which is to say all social life, is mere appearance. In Leighton's terms, Rosler thus tries to bring back the sacredness and content of the commodities, which is to say the kitchen items, by imbibing them with a depth of meaning that seems to stem from internalized anger. There is a certain ritual to her method. She picks up and puts down each object gently in alphabetical order, clearly pronounces its name, and then proceeds to show us, the viewer, its alternative use. Rosler herself is both an artist and a writer, and frequently comments on her own work, a practice that she describes as a necessity, which is why it is so important to consider Rosler's work in her own terms. She says that no art exists outside of a framing rhetoric. She says, "In my early video work, Semiotics of the Kitchen, Vital Statistics, and Budding Gourmet were initially almost universally rejected. My intentions seemed not to be clear if you didn't know more than one of my works. The work had no place to rest because there was no shelf for it, so I had to reach a certain point where there was enough work for people to see a context for these fairly disparate things to fit together." She also goes on to say that, strangely enough, the work is now sometimes considered as didactic, and the definition of didactic includes that the work's point is very clear, that it lectures, which is certainly the way that most students see the video today, taken out of its radical 70s video context. It is perhaps even regarded as boring to watch due to its one-point perspective and static mid-shot camera work. Technologically, it is incredibly simple, but technological complexity was not Rosler's point. The idea of boring, according to Rosler, is an individualized concept that can be thought about through the tools of reception that our culture has provided us. She says, "You may have been threatened by work you couldn't interpret, but it could be overinterpretation to say that it had to deal with some lack or buried revelation that was about to burst forth about yourself. It may simply be that you needed a pair of pliers, and there were no pliers in your toolbox, and you didn't know that pliers existed, even though you had been using different shaped ones all along." As to the feminist aspect of the video, Rosler comments that women artists are tarnished, and in most instances slandered, by the suggestion that the first time around, in the foundational movement of the late 1960s through the 70s, women were agitating only for themselves, white middle-class women. Krauss raises the question of whether the medium of video itself is narcissism.
Apple juice.
Looking at the reiterations of Rosler's video that comes up on YouTube, it seems that the Semiotics of the Kitchen has sparked some kind of self-reflexive, narcissistic, ego-laden production by young students or artists who wish to be associated with a continuation of the radical message of Rosler's video. Obviously, not all of them get it. The original video is not self-reflexive. It does not take advantage of the medium to pose questions of temporality. The homages posted on YouTube, however, represent a rabbit hole of possibilities of interpretation. Rosler once said that the more educated the audience, the more they want to talk about how other, more naive people might or might not see the work, perhaps a reflection of her attitude towards the practices of art historians. It is interesting, however, to see the exploitation of a very serious video by the online video community today.